In His presence there is comfort. In His presence there is peace. When we seek the Father's heart, we will find such blessed assurance in the presence of the Lord. Cover me, Lord, with your presence.
Good morning and welcome to Unveiled, a presentation of the Church Street Church of Christ in Lewisburg, Tennessee. Unveiled is simply a one-on-one conversation between Christian people designed to help each of us, as followers of Christ, become more aware of and better respond to the presence of God at work in our daily lives. Today, my special guest is Kevin Miller, and Kevin, thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this program. Why don't you take just a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself so that all of us can kind of get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. My name is Kevin Miller. I work at Lewisburg Electric. I'm the husband of Kristen Miller. I have two children, Lindley and Barrett Miller. They go to Cornersville School. One's in 5th and one's in 3rd grade. It's been since about 8 years since I've been a baptized believer and been coming to church frequently here, and it's been a blessing. Sometimes things like this are outside my comfort zone, but I know that you do most of your growing outside your comfort zone.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because that's really true for all of us. We all have certain things that we're comfortable with, and as long as we stay in that little cocoon, as I like to call it,
right,
everything's good. But you get outside of that and can't help but have those nerves kick up just a little bit. So I'm glad that you're here with us, and today we're just going to be talking about God a little bit. I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit and just find out what makes you tick and find out what your experiences of God have been in your life. And so where I'd like to start is this is just something that I'm always interested in asking anyone, and that is, at what point in your life did you discover for yourself in a very real way that God was real? I mean, I know we all have probably believed in God. We knew that God existed and maybe had friends or family members who were churchgoers or Bible readers, but what was it for you, where you reached a point in your life where you said, you know, this is not just a game, this is real?
I'd have to give a lot of credit to my wife, who introduced me to the church, and second to that, I would have to say my children, and being a part of their birth and seeing what a miracle that was. You know, it kind of called me to the table, so to speak, and I've failed a lot at being who I need to be for them and for my wife, but I feel like every day it gets better and better, and I stumble along the way, and I just try to keep my head up and keep working toward the goal. But that, I would say, that would be the spot where it really shined a light for me.
So would you say it was when you first met Kristen, or was it some time after that before this moment of discovery came for you?
I'd say it was after that. I mean, she went to church religiously, you know, when we met and after we married, and I didn't. But I work with a really good group of guys, some really good Christian fellas there, and they're pretty encouraging. And you know, the more you're around God's people, the more it weighs on your heart, and the more you think about things. And when I started doing some reading for myself and some digging for myself and some self-reflection, it exposed that void that was missing.
So whenever your children were each born, you said that was kind of a life-changing, sort of a wake-up call for you. Did you feel the presence of God at that moment?
I did, and I didn't immediately go to work, believe it or not. And that's kind of what I did do is I'm going to work really, really hard at my job. I'm going to try to advance my career. I'm going to try to provide, but ultimately that ought to take a lot further back seat than my faith. What they need most of me is for me to lead by example in my faith. And so it took some years before I acknowledged that, and it took several years before I tried to start living that.
Well, I'm a big believer that every person, no matter what his or her background is on a personal journey. I believe that God is working in our lives, and I believe God has a plan, an individual plan for you and an individual plan for me. And through the course of our life, we're on this pathway that we ourselves might not even recognize. But all things are working together for good. God has a plan. And I'm just interested in hearing from people like you to find out what your story is, because I think at some point you recognize that God has something in mind for you, that life is not just something where you get up and go to work and come home and go to bed, but there's more to it than that.
Yes, sir. And I think, like you say, the more you look for Him, the more you find Him, and the more you study, the more you're drawn. For me personally, I find the more I get involved with the church, and the more I get involved, when I say the church, I mean the people. The more time I spend with the church, the more I want to be with the church, and the more I want to, show others the blessing that this family can give.
I think of it this way sometimes. I think every person has what I like to describe as a God-shaped hole inside him or her. And what that means is there's this feeling of emptiness, this feeling of complete non-fulfillment until that hole is filled. And I think human beings, whether they're churchgoers or not, are all seeking something to fill this void in their life, to feel fulfilled, to feel content. And they'll never feel that until God fills that hole. He's the only person that fits that. And so when I listen to you talk about your co-workers or your children being born or even your relationship with your wife, I hear you talking about things that God is doing in your life and people He's using, and you feel that void being filled along the way.
Yes, sir, absolutely. I don't think there's, like I say, I think we're prone to try to fill it with things and people, but that puzzle piece just doesn't fit. I think you're absolutely right.
So, while we're talking about your family a little bit, tell us a little bit about your wife and how the two of you met. And what I'm most interested in here is not just your life story per se, but if God really is working in our lives at times that we may not have even noticed it, how do you think He may have been working in your life to bring you to the point where you met Kristen and the two of you decided that you were going to spend the rest of your lives together?
It was a pretty fast process when we met, and like I say, I don't really think it's by chance. It seemed that way at the time, but I don't think we're predestined for anything, but I think God knows where we're going to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
God knows what my weaknesses are and where I struggle, and He knows what Kristen's weaknesses are and where she struggles, and I think that He just knew that it was going to take exactly me to fight the good fight with her, and vice versa. Our marriage is no different than any other one. We've been through some struggles. We've had some hard times, and we've had some really good times. And the very best times is when we focus and put God at the head of the table. And so that's what we strive to do every day at this point, from this point forward.
Well, I'm a preacher, so you would expect me to say what I'm about to say, but when I perform wedding ceremonies, I'm always suggesting strongly to grooms and brides that a marriage to work has to be a marriage of three. the husband, the wife, and God first and foremost.
Yes, sir. I totally agree.
Because that's what gives our life purpose individually. That's what gives our marriage purpose. And especially, as you well know by now, as a father, that's what gives identity even to your children.
Well, it gives us a direction, a common, with anything, whether it be at work or whether it be at church or, when you have a common goal, and the goal in this case for me and Kristen both is to be pleasing to God and to not earn our way to heaven, but just try to be pleasing to God. When we both work toward the same goal, it's natural that we're going to come closer together because of it. That's the way it's laid out. It's what the good book tells us, is if we focus on Him, the rest will take care of itself.
You were mentioning earlier that God is not that hard to find. When you start becoming aware of His presence and you start thinking about Him more, you see His handiwork. Are there other instances in your life where you just had to say to yourself, "Now that's a God thing"?
Yeah, I would say there's a whole lot of instances where that happens, now more than ever. I don't coincidences aren't something that I believe in anymore. It happens at work, it happens at home, it happens when I'm driving down the road, when I see something really beautiful, whether I'm out in the mountains or whatever. I see Him everywhere I look now, and I think it's because I'm aware of Him. I'm conscious that it is His work.
And really, that's the purpose of this whole program, is to just kind of increase our awareness, myself included, to start looking at everything in life not just as something that's coincidental or that's just happenstance, but there's a plan in place here. There's an organization, that God is at work in our lives. You mentioned that God is busier in your life now more than ever before.
Yes, sir.
Do you think God is doing more now than He's ever done before, or are you just noticing more now?
I think He's always been there. It's just that I've never took the time to acknowledge that it was Him doing it. One thing that's kind of, a couple years back, I had some pretty serious back problems. I ended up having a back surgery, and I had a ruptured disc, and there was a lot of problems. And I think I don't think it was God that hurt my back. I'm not going to say that, but what I do think is that God used that for me to humble myself, because I've always been the type of person where I just soon do it myself, and I know it's done right, kind of, and hard-headed. And for the first time in my life, I've had to lean on others and to kind of take a step back and depend on other people. And I think it's helped me in my relationship with my coworkers and with my family. So
we live in a culture that says the strong are those who can take care of themselves. They don't need anyone or anything. And yet, Christianity teaches us just the opposite.
Yes, sir.
It teaches us in Scripture that we learn to be dependent. Not dependent on other people so much, but dependent first and foremost on God, and then through that developing sort of an interdependency with other people who are also dependent on God.
Yes, sir. Making yourself nothing, especially as a male. I can't speak for females because I don't know what. I still ain't figured out what they got going on. But from a male standpoint, I think there's a part in us that just wants to be self-sufficient and wants to do for ourselves. And pride, for myself anyway, has always been something that I struggled with. And it's not until, and I'm not saying I still don't struggle with it, but I recognize it now. And I think that's the first step to fixing any problem, is recognizing it.
Absolutely.
And so when I try to take a step back and recognize, is that pride or is that selfishness? I think that's what allows me to try to humble myself and take an outside look in.
Well, I think that's really important to get to. That's a great step of maturity, to get to a point where you say, is the problem me? Is there something that I need to be working on? Because, like you said, if we don't recognize our own flaws, we're never going to do anything to fix them.
Yes, sir.
And for a person like yourself to be able to say, this is something that I see that's a weakness in myself and I need to work on it, that's a great step of maturity.
Yes, sir. It's there's still several things in my life that I'm trying to sort out right now, and even on a daily basis, and that I've got several things left undone, and I'm just trying to focus on one thing at a time, and not overwhelm myself, and just try to every day try to wake up, be pleasing to God. And I still stumble, but the goal is the same. Sometimes I find I just got to stop in the middle of whatever I'm doing and pray right then because I need His help.
Okay. What about your background? Have you always lived in Lewisburg?
I've grown up in Lewisburg. I've grown up in Belfast, and now I live just a stone's throw away on Holly Grove Road, so I didn't go far. I was born in Pontiac, Michigan. I got here as quick as I could. I moved when I was about 8. Yeah, this is home for me, no doubt.
So, when you look back on that phase of your life, where was God in all of that? And I'm not saying you were necessarily a person at 8 years old who was focused on God, but as an adult, when you look back, what role do you think God played in bringing you to this part of the world so that you would be here at this stage in your life?
I think there's a lot more exposure to God where we live. I think anybody listening to this will understand exactly what I'm saying. I think there's a lot more exposure to God and His work and a lot more acknowledgement of God and His work where we live than in other parts of the country. So it's a blessing that I'm here because I don't know that I would have got that where I was.
So, when you really boil it all down, if you weren't in this part of the country, you wouldn't be married to Kristen.
Absolutely.
Your children that you have a relationship now with would not exist. And I don't mean to get all weird about it, but I think it's important for us to just acknowledge that even when we are not aware of God, He's busy in our lives, and He's got a plan for us, and He's making things and opportunities available for us. And like you referred to earlier, I'm not suggesting that all of this is predestination and we're just robots and God is throwing the switches for us. But I am saying that as life happens, God is always there. You know that even now, as you said just a minute ago, you can stop at any moment and pray when you feel that need. And when you do that, you feel like you're being heard, right?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And one thing that was really hard for me to wrap my head around for a long time was, an absence of an answer is an answer. And that's hard. That's that's a hard one to swallow. And I got to remind myself of that a lot. If I pray for something or, I ask for help and, if I don't get what I was asking for, that's an answer in itself. And I think I would imagine that's a pretty common struggle for Christians and non-Christians. People ask for things and they don't get them.
Right. We're always happy with a God who answers our prayers exactly like we think they should be answered, right?
Right. My kids don't always get the answer they're looking for.
That's exactly right. Sometimes we fail to see that, it was God who came up with the idea for us to be His children, for Him to be our Father. We understand that as human fathers, that we love our kids too much to give them everything they want, right?
Right, absolutely.
And so we have a hard time understanding that when the shoe is on the other foot.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm interested in you taking a look at just where you are right now, even today, this very moment. What's God up to in your life?
He's intertangled in everything we're doing right now. Like my wife is, she's got into teaching Sunday school classes for the kids, and we've last year was the first year that I got involved in advance, and I've been putting them off for years, and I finally went and had a blast. I think he's finding my place. He's helping me find my place in where I can help with the knowledge that I have and the things that I've been through. And there's other Christians and other non-Christians that I'm sure struggling with the same things, some of the same things that I have, and I'm trying to seek those people out and see if I can. I think that's something that he's got up his sleeve for me, is just to try to help others. It's hard to help someone if you've never been through what they're going through. I'd like to be used as I want to be used in a way that I can be beneficial to others, not for my own recognition, but for God's. And we can have sympathy for people, but it's hard to have empathy unless. Am I saying that right? Have I got them right?
Yeah.
Unless we've been there and done that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's wrapped himself in, he's intertangled himself in my life pretty heavily right now, and we're going to try to keep that way.
That's good. So you mentioned earlier that you had been, you've been a Christian for, 8 years, did you say?
Yes, sir.
And so how has life changed for you in the past 8 years?
A couple years ago, I hit rock bottom, like rock bottom, and I feel like it's really hard to humble yourself until you're at that spot. When you realize that it's the only place to go is up, and the only person that can help you there is God Himself. Because at some point in our lives, whether it be our family, our friends, our wives, our children, everybody's going to let us down sooner or later, because they're human. Just like we're going to let all those people down sooner or later. But God said He wouldn't. He said He'd always be there, and that's what I clung to, and that's where I'm at now.
I've been here with the Church Street family for about 10 years now, and so I have known you for several years.
Yes, sir.
And I see a lot of change in you. I see, at first you were just the person I always saw as I was preaching, because you stood above everyone
Right.
else. For those of you who don't know Kevin, he's a tall man. But I see you more and more, especially over the last year or two. Seem like you're much more visible, not because you're taller than everyone else physically, but I see you stepping up and wanting to be involved in the church family, and wanting to be useful, and even being an encourager to others in your same age group, and getting groups of people together for fellowship, and getting groups of people together to go have a meal together, and just let the kids be together and play. And
Yes, sir.
that's wonderful, and I hope you see that as God's working on you.
Absolutely. It's a blessing in itself. And, I think all too often we get in our own way, and I know I have anyway. I just had to step back and just let it be. And the minute that I quit trying to control every scenario and trying to, quit worrying about things so much and just let be, God took over, and it's just getting easier and better by the day.
Well, what's fascinating about that too, and I'm speaking as one who's kind of on the outside looking in, just observing. As you become more comfortable with what God is doing with you, as you feel these changes, as you invest more of your time, more of your energy in being a part of not just a church attender, but a member of the family.
Right.
That rubs off on other people.
Yes, sir.
Other people notice that, and it's not that you're preaching to them or anything. You're just being yourself, but God's shining through you, and other people see that, and they start to want some of that for themselves. That just seems to be the way God works.
Yes, sir, it does. Anytime something's good in someone's life, anytime someone's having a lot of fun, it's just natural to want to be a part of it. And as for me and mine, we're having a lot of fun right now, and we try to invite as many people and have as many people a part of that as we can.
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do with this program, or that I'm trying to do, is we call this program Unveiled, because the idea is based on when Moses is in the presence of God, he doesn't need a veil because he's right there with God. When he comes down from the mountain in Exodus 34, his face is glowing with the glory of God, and the people obviously notice it. And Moses puts a veil over his face, not to protect the eyes of the people looking at the brightness, but Paul says in 1 Corinthians, he does that, or excuse me, in 2 Corinthians, he does that to make sure that the people don't see the glory of God fading away from his face when he's not physically in the presence of God.
Right.
Well, the whole idea for Unveiled is, even today, we want to live unveiled lives. And what that means is let's become so aware of the presence of God that our lives just radiate that.
Absolutely.
People hear us talk about God. People see how much we're enjoying life, and that's what I'm referring to with your relationship with these other families. There's something very contagious about that.
Yes,
People see the glory of God, and then they want some of that for themselves, and before long, they're radiating the glory of God as well.
Absolutely.
No veils needed.
Absolutely.
Well, Kevin, I want to thank you for being with me today. This is kind of our maiden voyage for this program, and you've done an excellent job.
Well,
I appreciate you taking the time to be with me.
It's been fun.
Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
If you're looking to fill that God-shaped hole, come see us.
All right.
We'll be glad to have you.
Very good. All right, that's Kevin Miller, and we want to thank you once again, Kevin, for being with us.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Unveiled, a presentation of the Church Street Church of Christ in Lewisburg, Tennessee. I am Kyle Bolton, the pulpit minister at Church Street, and I would like to personally invite you to come be with us during our times of worship and Bible study together. We meet every Sunday at 9 o'clock a.m. for our morning worship, followed by Bible classes for all ages at 10:15 a.m. We meet again on Sunday evenings at 6 o'clock p.m. We also have a midweek meeting for further Bible study on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. I would also like to invite you to tune in to this radio station every Monday through Saturday from 6:40 to 6:45 a.m. for our daily devotional program called Upreach. Thank you for listening. Have a blessed day.
In His presence there is comfort. In His presence there is peace. When we seek the Father's heart, we will find such blessed assurance in the presence of the Lord. In His presence there is comfort. In His presence there is peace. When we seek the Father's heart, we will find such blessed assurance in the presence of the Lord. Cover me, Lord, with your presence. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so